Okay, so I am maybe the first psychoanalyst who's gotten all her sound checks by Lucidious. Is it possibly true, Lucidious?
Yeah, I'll give the credit to Ben and Daniel.
All right. Well, I think that it took three people to get this going, but welcome, Lucidious. Thank you so much for
Thank you.
joining us.
Of
As
course.
my listeners know, I am Freudina, and we're really excited here to have Lucidious on with us today. As we sit, I think it's day one of the COVID vaccine being sent to our
That is true. That is
so
true.
it's an auspicious day to meet.
Yeah, it is. It's a very weird time for everyone right
Yeah.
now.
And I just wanted to thank you for taking the time to come by and meet. Just for everyone should know, Lucidius and I met about 5 minutes ago, where he figured out
Hmm.
how sound works. On COVID, we are not in a recording studio, but
Right.
we're both sitting in our altar, I guess, our art altar spaces.
That's
Um,
right.
yeah, which is strange, right? It's a little weird not to still be meeting people in
It's
person.
strange. It's strange, but it also shows that we're capable of doing so much with where we are. Like I don't have to fly to you to have a great, beneficial conversation.
Yeah, it's totally awesome. So I'm gonna tell you a little bit about why I was curious about meeting you,
Please.
just so the listeners know.
Yeah.
Um, Lucidius is totally awesome. I know this because he got a random text, or I guess someone on his team got a random text saying, Freudina is totally interested in meeting you. And within like 24 hours, I got a yeah, sure, which is fantastic. I know zero about rap or hip hop, or I should say, Lucidius, that I knew nothing until a week ago. But
Yeah.
I dove into this like more than I did either one of my doctoral theses. I just did it.
Whoa.
I felt like if you were going to be here, I'm absolutely going to do the best I can. So I have a lot of words that I know are now associated with what goes on, but I have zero
Yeah.
previous knowledge. So there will be many gaps.
Sure.
But I was going to tell you just by way of introduction a little bit about why I was so interested in having you be our
Hmm.
first interview. We did a full season of Ask Freudina, but I kind of was thinking a lot about over this pandemic about people who are really trying to make a difference mental health wise from all different fields. And I started Freudina basically the very beginning of March. I'm originally from New York, and the hospitals began to be overrun, and many of my friends who are therapists started to become overwhelmed. Started running groups, and also, in addition to regular therapy groups, started running some improv groups because what I really like doing with my free time to offset a lot of the more serious stuff is improv. And
Mm.
noticed the sort of heavy burden that so many people were carrying. So when I started thinking about, well, how can we have a conversation about mental health with non-mental health practitioners?
Sure.
What segment of the population would I most want to reach? I started really realizing how many people I know listen to hip hop and rap, on my team and my sons. And this is a space that they spend their time in COVID with people
Mm.
like you, which is incredible, right? Rather than people, they're spending it in a room. So then
Right.
I popped into a search engine with the help of Ben, and there you are, talking about the more meaningful things in life, and reaching a heck of a lot more people than we do one on one. So I
What
really
did you search?
well, I basically, I explained to you I knew zero about hip hop and rap, until a few weeks ago, but
Right.
started really just basic Googling about people who are hip hop artists who are interested in mental health
Mm.
awareness. And Ben on my team said, if Lucidius will do it, he's your guy. That's it. He's your guy. And look him
Rock
up.
on, Ben.
And Ben
Good
got
job.
it. And he's your guy. And I was actually, my own expectations were that I might find somebody, and I know a couple of people, but I might find somebody who was willing to do it as a favor. But what really shocked me and gave me, I must tell you, a sense of not being as alone in the world myself
Mm.
was when I saw that you're coming from a very different place but in terms of your roots and where you start out, what you do professionally, but that I had spent all these months trying to bring mental health to the masses, and sort of a DIY approach for mental health, because I saw that the usual therapy was simply not helpful enough. And there you were, goodness knows, doing the exact same thing from a different place. So my cup runneth over, really,
Mm.
a sense of kinship. So I just can't tell you how thrilled I was to see that someone who's closer in to the kinds of fan base you have is able to offer that from that perspective, rather than people needing to reach out across the divide to Freudina, which I think can be a bit more of a reach.
Sure.
So I feel that I know a bit about you, but I know you're quite practiced in telling it in your own words. If you don't mind telling us a little bit of how you came to the ideas of mental health. And I know a lot of it came from what I heard earlier is it was helpful for you.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thanks for Googling me. That's nice. Yeah, I think you probably found it because I started down that. I don't know if you found like digital media news, or there's like two other podcasts I did. One specifically really touched on what my day to day experiences were with some of these people, with some of the youth. And now, honestly, I don't even want to say youth because it's everyone across the board, from 13-year-olds all the way up to, I've had 60-year-olds, 70-year-olds messaging me that not big fans of hip hop, but were relating to some of the same issues and topics and feelings, and just not knowing how to communicate them, right? Um, so yeah, as far as how it impacted me early on, I didn't even start rapping until I was 18 or 19. And I'm actually turning 30 next week. So,
Congrats.
uh,
Congrats. Will you be
uh,
doing anything for that?
yeah, well, we were going to in COVID. So, my roommates and I, my girlfriend and I, are going to have a nice celebration here at the house,
Cool.
and celebrate what we do have. So, yeah, I planned on going to Thailand when I was 30, when I was 15, but
Uh-huh.
it'll still happen.
All
It'll
right.
still
But
happen.
when you were 15, you had, I mean, from what I understand, you didn't even know that you'd be doing rap or hip hop. Because,
No,
right? Yeah, life is
no. When
surprising.
I was 15, I actually had a very strong interest in criminal justice, and I have a degree in criminology and homeland security, and very quickly changed my mind after interning with the NRA. I was just like, this is a tough field. So, yeah, so back to the question, I started writing a lot and following a lot of hip hop artists, predominantly Eminem back then. And although he has a very rough life, I think the beautiful thing about music is somebody can say something, and 1,000 people are going to reflect and respond and relate differently. They're going to relate in their own way, even though it's not maybe not the exact same situation. I was relating to what Eminem was saying. I was having a lot of fights in my house. I was having tension at home, like constantly. I was isolated and staying in my room, kind of like self, um, attempting to self soothe myself, but in a negative way. And music is by far, I think back to when I was 8, 9, 10, all the way through my teenage years, the only thing that actually kept me sane was music. I loved it, and I didn't even write. At that time, I was just listening and rapping to them, rapping with them, and just they were my role models. I just loved them so much. And it wasn't until I was in college that I actually started experimenting with, okay, what does it mean to actually, how do I write this stuff? And sometimes it was poetry, sometimes it was just random sentences of how I was feeling. And somehow I found myself on the internet looking up beats and how to rap and how to sound cool. And it sounded, to be honest, quite miserable for like the first 2 years. It was
Yeah.
not good. Um, but I developed a fascination really with just expression, and how seriously how important it is to, even if it's not to a therapist or to another person, just to ourselves, how important it is to write out, the truth and what we're feeling. Because if I never started that, then I wouldn't be here, and both physically and career wise. And it just slowly progressed. I believe that as when we take a step in a direction and we meet somebody, or we set an intention of what we want, or what we desire, that things just start to domino effect. And I met people at the music productions club. My first roommate was a drummer. Guess what? Freestyling, rap, and drummers go really well together. So it's like, okay. He was like, yo, Lucid, check this out, And I was like, and we just, for 3 years, we just experimented and developed sounds. And as I said, I've probably written hundreds of songs, and the first 90% of them were terrible. But it wasn't about that. It was about healing and what I was getting from it. It's basically a journal. And I think everyone, regardless of being a musician or not, I would recommend them having a journal. But it turned into music for me. And it just became a story, just started writing. If I'm in a low, if I'm feeling negative, dealing with a certain state of mind or emotion, well, then I'm going to make a song specifically from that place. And I'm going to think about what in that emotion am I struggling with, and find a way to release it. Just find a way to write about it.
I guess I was really taken. I was listening to, I guess, two of the interviews you had done, and then read a little bit about you online. And some of the things you said struck me. Just from my perspective, I always like to think about, what brings people to do meaningful things in the world, right? Now, how is it someone is created that becomes a person that, such as yourself, not to be silly about it, but at this stage of the game, in your late 20s, almost 30, right? And a music career that's obviously flourishing and getting bigger every day. I guess COVID will be an opportunity to go out and really be with the people who love you, and I think you love back. Given the way you talk about the Lucidians and the kinds of stuff I've seen, it seems like it's a two-way relationship of the very best sort. But I guess was trying to think, one of the things I do as a psychoanalyst and in trying to bring mental health to the people, so people can really take ownership over their mental health to the extent they can, find the therapists that work for them, find the kinds of mental health activities that support where they're at when they're in crisis, know what to do. Again, these are some of the main reasons I really was just so delighted to find that there was someone in music who was doing that. One of the things that came to mind, is how is a Lucidious made? Because when we think about it as psychoanalysts, we're moving backwards. We're saying people come in sometimes in the worst day of their lives. Sometimes we don't catch them, as you've alluded to, and as certainly in my experience, sometimes we don't catch people. They fall through, and we're not able to do that. And that's obviously unbearably sad, as you've written about very evocatively. But I think most of our listeners are not more than one step removed of having lost someone through suicide. I'll be teaching a suicide curriculum at the St. Louis Psychoanalytic this semester. And you should know, I wrote the curriculum. I listened to your song twice, and then I wrote an email saying I'm going to revise this curriculum.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Why?
I'm going to tell you why. I think as practitioners, it's you said something really meaningful, actually. I think it was on a podcast with Ari's Take. You said something really meaningful that got a little bit lost just because you were covering so much. It was an hour and 46-minute interview.
It was long.
It was long, but it was a beautiful interview. And one of the things you said was they had started responding by text to all the people you could who were at the edge of things, who really were writing to you at the moment of despair. And some of that, I guess, I'm a big believer in trying to keep people from more than necessary pain that is more than necessary. So one of the things you were describing there is what I would call vicarious traumatization. I think you described on that interview a little bit about what it's like to be the person that people are reaching out to. And if you'd be okay sharing a little bit of that, but not too much, that would be okay. When I mean a little is enough for you and not too much for you, because I think you're right that you need to preserve you. But what it's like and why you think that people are reaching out to you, I think that would be just important for our listeners to hear a bit about.
That's an interesting question. It's been a journey for me in terms of how it has impacted me in my daily life and my mind since like early on, for really about 4 years now. It's been about 4 years. where I can open my phone, and which feels very surreal, where I can open my phone and undoubtedly within 30 to 40 seconds find some form of suicidal, depressed, or anxious incoming message. It's almost guaranteed for 4 years. And it's been a dedication of mine. I won't say responsibility. It feels like my responsibility, even though my therapist and other people have said it's not, to open and to be there for as many as I can. I've had weeks where I've spent 40 hours, like I've literally dedicated my whole week to just trying to respond and trying to engage. And the downside with that is it's a never-ending tunnel. And when I respond to one, well, that's just peeling back a curtain to somebody's world. And when there's hundreds of them, or thousands of them, it's very hard to give the proper attention needed and deserved to someone like in that state of mind. So early on, I was just completely overwhelmed. I was very excited. I was like, holy crap, like, read this. I was like, Mom, like my producer, like, did you look at this? And people are it's so what seems to be like not real, that they just don't know how to respond. They're like, oh my God, like, I don't know. I couldn't do that. I couldn't read that. I'm not sure how to help you with that. How are you feeling about it though? Because it's like a very,
Mm-hmm.
you're in this,
Yeah.
you're in this field, so you fully understand.
Yeah.
We can take a very practical. I'm not going to say, I'm very empathetic, and it still really impacts me to this day. And sometimes it can mess up a full day for me, depending on what I read. But most of the time, I'm able to come at these messages with a clear head, no matter how tough they are. And there's some very, very disturbing stories that I've been sent, and respond with love and be neutral and just be that receiving party for them without getting triggered and emotionally damaged and feeling trauma. But for the first 2 years, I'll be honest, I really think some of those texts put me in depression, like especially the ones that I lost, because I know some of the fans that I've lost have killed themselves. And I don't think any of them are my fault. I know they're not my fault. In fact, I think if anything, I was able to help at the end. But yeah, like it's frustrating. I was on my first tour last year. I was in Toronto, actually. I was in Canada, and this is still a new experience to me. Now I'm actually talking to them face to face. 14-year-old walks in, 8-year-old walks in, 35-year-old, and they're all like crying and they're talking to me. And I'm like, so this is the same thing as the messages, just in human form. And one of them came to me and he was like, do you remember this girl? She was in your group for like a year and a half, because I have multiple groups where Lucidians can interact and just reach out. And I was like, yeah, I do. I've talked to her. I pulled her up on my phone. I was like, we've talked over the last few years. She's one of my day one fans. And he was like, she was like a mom to me. I met her through your community, and she killed herself last week. And I was like, it's
Yeah.
I felt some responsibility because I didn't answer her last message, and that hurt me because I'm human. And I wonder, if I opened it, could I have stopped it? And the answer is no, but I could have helped, and I did my best. And I think at the end of the day, I'm very happy that I have the opportunity to respond to as many as I do. And I've had a lot of therapy around it, because it's just, I don't think any human is meant to carry. I've even talked to my therapist. My therapist has tons of clients. I mean, he's a very successful guy, but we're talking whatever. Like, let's just call it 30 clients. Let's say he's seeing 30 a week. I think that's more than he's seeing, but that is overwhelming itself, right? As a therapist to manage. But I could easily open 450 messages, and like just looking at it is just completely overwhelming. So I've limited myself at this point in the time to opening a certain amount. And I've decided that whatever I do open, I'm going to give my full attention, but I'm going to open less than I used to. I'll do my best to open them over time, but I'm not going to unless I can respond and and like really be there. I'm just not going to open them because I think it will do a disservice to open something and not be able to respond or be emotionally available. Um,
So there's something.
and the last thing I would say about that is most artists in my field, and I think that's what makes this interesting. 90% of artists they just don't even open them because it basically gets in the way of our creativity. It gets in the way of our daily life. It gets in the way of my personal relationships when I'm trying to be here for my partner or my mom or someone, and then I open my phone, and one of my fans' father killed themselves yesterday, is contemplating it right now, listening to my music right now. How do I go from this world to I'm about to cook lunch? It's like because they're both happening at the same exact time.
That's
Um, I know that was a very like long-winded, all over the place response, but that's how it feels. It's a very emotional experience.
yeah.
So,
I mean, I guess what you're thinking about is your lack of ability, even though cognitively you're aware that it can't be done. Emotionally, it doesn't feel okay. That makes you into a quality human being, right? If you were just totally fine, like I did what I could do, and you said, but obviously just one person is incapable. That would be a certain lack of empathy. I think what you're talking about is stretching how empathic you can be and still be functional. And I guess one of the most really unusual things about you is I think a couple of times I've seen you say different things about it, and of course I'm sure you're misquoted, but so I'm trying to use the things where you've said things directly at least, was you talked about what I would call a thin line between music being a way in which you're venting, at least in the beginning, you're expressing yourself. And I guess to me, in some way, you've now crossed over a little bit into being the recipient of these kinds of Insta or however else you're getting the DMs, I'm not sure.
hmm
And you're speaking to another, right? So there's a different way in which first you just, as you said, you're journaling, but you just happen to be musically talented, right? You're writing
sure.
poetry. And now there's a way in which that, you're writing for an audience. And I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about emotionally if that shifts things anything at all for you.
Mm, it does. It's like when someone sings in the shower and you overhear them and they're just beautiful voice. They're amazing. And then they come out and you go, hey, I was telling Sammy over here you're a great singer. You want to come on, show off. It's that moment. As soon as light is shed on something, what happens is our perspective on ourselves heightens and it turns inward. Like we go from expressing and releasing to analyzing that expression and making assumptions of what the other party is going to think about it. And it undoubtedly instantly creates a disconnect. Like, whoa, maybe I shouldn't say that. That could offend them. Or that could be, come on, like that rhyme's not cool enough. Even if it's the truth, it's just kind of lame. It's just, somebody will make fun of me for that. Or, writing a whole thing out and just feeling like it's not good enough compared to the last radio single that you heard and trashing it. And before, it was never about that. It was, and it really, I hate using the word should because the word should itself has like judgment in it. But like, I feel like art should not be about that. It should be about the internal healing and just expression of a human. And if they relate, great. If they don't relate, great. Unfortunately, we live in a generation where the availability and just the opportunity to send hatred to people is so easy. It's so at our fingertips to just reach out to someone and say anything we want, and that's really messed with artists. Like I have a lot of friends that artists are anxious, artists are struggling. They're, it's interesting that we're the source of so many people's healing. Like music is my healing too. I have artists that I love. It's so interesting to be the source and then to have the public, different parts of the public, also be the source of our trauma. because we're expected, not really expected, but to just kind of be this dartboard, and people are just throwing darts at us with no idea what those messages and words are doing to us. Um, and it really challenges the creative process rather than just coming in the studio, which I'm in right now, and just, this is how I'm feeling. Let's have fun, or let's maybe be sad and like write about this. Halfway through, I start thinking about the album. I start thinking about streams. I start thinking about money. I start thinking about all the people are saying, "Oh, can you just make an upbeat track? Can you stop talking about such serious stuff?" And I'm like, all those voices just start talking, and my creative flow slowly disappears. You
Hmm.
know?
So it seems like
Um,
when you're talking, speaking in that sense, you used the word should about a minute ago, and you said, well, we shouldn't have shoulds. It sounds
mm,
like a lot of the shoulds are bothering you. Should have an
right,
upbeat track, should respond to this, should be.
right.
Uh-huh. So is that a
Yeah,
shift for you, or there weren't as many shoulds before when you owed nobody anything and it was just your space?
that's right. There was no shoulds.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So in a way, I guess I'm thinking about that a little bit. Just your space to vent or to be or to write your poetry, which I guess becomes hip hop,
yeah.
but to speak your truth to yourself. I guess you're saying that the vessel that contains it now is now a vessel that you know is going to be shared with others. And I'm wondering, are there spaces that you have? Are there times you compose where you're like, well, this song's just for me. I'm actually going to swear to myself no matter what happens. Maybe in 5 years I'll open this up, but right now I'm going to write something. This
Hmm.
one's for me.
I have been encouraged to do that, actually, and I've never taken myself up on it. I think it's a wonderful idea. I'm built into the business mentality of, why waste my time if I can't release it, and that's silly, but that's just kind of how I've been. I work a lot, so I want to get the music out there, and I'm like, well, I want to spend time on what's actually going to be digested by the public and going to be most beneficial to as many people as possible and myself. And short answer is no. Other answer is, I will take your challenge, and I will
Will
I
you?
will do that.
Will you?
Yes, I will.
Can we put a date on it? Like, do you feel comfortable saying in X time, I'm going to get back to you, Freudina, and I will
I
have
think,
done it?
how about by genuine? I'll say this. I don't know if it's going to be a full song, like a hook and everything, but I will dedicate a full verse, like 16 to 24 bars, that I will not release. That will be just for me by Christmas.
No way.
Yeah,
That is awesome.
deal.
How does that feel that
That'll help.
how did you feel that you said that actually?
Shit, I better write that down. It feels good. It actually, this conversation reminds me of, because I used to judge artists a lot before I was one, of like, if somebody came out with a new album and I didn't really like it, I'd make fun of them when I was younger. I'm like, oh, I hate his new sound. I just wish he would go back to just sticking what he was good at. Like, he's fallen off the map. Not realizing that how damaging that is to the artist. And now it makes sense why there are so many one-hit wonders. I totally get it now. So I think I'm actually
Yeah,
grateful
say
for,
it so people get it actually. Because I think it's
yeah,
really important when you talk a lot in your music about people, all sorts of people of power. In fact, like your hashtag equals, right? And I think you're actually talking about that now as well. So I guess it would be wonderful for the listeners to hear what you mean by that. Like, why are there one hit wonders?
yeah.
Because
I do believe there are. I'm not going to say this is fact, right? This is
Mhm.
my belief, and there's probably multiple reasons why there's one hit wonders. But one of the biggest reasons is because when an artist gets a hit like that, they're not just getting the money. They're getting public influence instantaneously, and the pressure that comes with, one, the judgment that comes with just that much exposure. Of course, 1 out of 50 people aren't going to like you. Well, times that to 50 million. How many people are not going to like you? And they're going to make it very known. And like, there could be 1,200 likes, 6 dislikes. Which one do artists tend to look at? The six do. What were those 6 people thinking? What did I do wrong to upset those 6 people. So when you look at like such a large scale, a one-hit wonder, somebody that goes global, they internally struggle with showing up and making a second hit that's just as good. Um, Both the internal pressure of creating it, there's like, oh my God, like even somebody I look up to, NF, who really actually does a lot of this mental health stuff too. He even said at the peak of his career, when he was the highest, he was the most depressed in his whole life at the highest point of his career. And I think it's that pressure that's created. How am I going to sustain this? How can I recreate that? You can't recreate it. And that's the thing is people try. They expect us. They expect artists to just hit and compare to the last one. But we're different people every time that we create music. You know, we're not going to regurgitate the same exact story, the same exact sound. Like that's not fun for us. And I think it's this issue of what my third album is called, Enough. And I really think that the one hit wonder issue is kind of around this whole concept of enough. It's just like you thought that would do it, but it didn't do it. And I thought that a million plays I could die a happy man and just be like, I did it. It's over. And I did a million, and then like it, we're at like 150 million, and it's just like every million, every sale, every number, you reach it, or I'll speak for myself, I reach it, and I'm like, what's next? It's recognition that there is no enough in a number or in an accolade. There is no, and it's learning that, which I haven't mastered at all. It's learning that enough already is, and whether it's a million, 10 million, or one, that changes nothing about the value that I'm getting from it and the value that the project is. And the beauty in the struggle that all these artists talk about, like there's beauty in the struggle, there's beauty in the journey, beauty in the come up. They miss that. I missed that. I missed it doesn't matter what this does. It doesn't matter what number this hits. I just want to create it. I just want to make it. I want to feel it. And I genuinely believe that's why bands, rappers, artists, singers fall off. They just can't handle it. It's genuinely impacted my career. Like I've actually considered stopping at times. I'm like, I don't enjoy this anymore. And I'm like, well, I can't stop. There's 500,000 people listening right now that are getting benefit from it. And I love it deep down, but it kind of becomes torture to artists of like, I'm not really enjoying writing this right now. And I don't even resonate with what I'm writing. So I really resonate with artists struggling with that. And I think that's why I start to feel bad when I hear people or like strangers at a party or something just talking about how this artist fell off and like, oh, he's a ghost, man. He's not good anymore. I'm just like, would you talk about your brother that way? Would you talk about your sister that way? Would you encourage them to keep making new, variety-filled music, or would you completely shit on them and say, yeah, you just didn't match up to your record 2 years ago, I'm not going to listen to you anymore?
I wonder if you could reflect back actually when you were saying, when I go back in, and I can't imagine before you made your Christmas commitment, which I'm looking forward to hearing from you on December 25th, alternative Christmas. But before you sort of said, actually, yeah, I'm going to do that. If you can reflect back on why you haven't been doing it in the context of what you've been talking about, do you have a sense now?
It's a good question too. I think the human answer, at least up front, is that I'm scared of writing my own truth. I've come back around where I didn't start. I started like ruthless. I wrote everything. I was angry, and I didn't care if my dad heard it. And I was like, that's beautiful. And I think because of the space I've entered, the career I've entered, the judgment on me, I think I've entered back into a place where I'm just scared to be honest. And it's like this expectation that I'm supposed to be further along than I am. And since I am the mental health awareness and doing these speaking, like it's also realizing, like I tell my fans, I'm still struggling with this, and I will be until the day I die. There's always going to be ups and downs and lows and highs, and like you don't just get over it and life stops punching you. I think we just learn to respond to it differently, and yeah, just a lot of mental health tools that can be utilized. But I start to feel like, okay, I'm on broken record at this point, and on top of that, which kind of loops back around to your question, there is a sense of, I don't know if I should be this honest about this subject. It could do damage to the person listening, or do I want my family to hear how I feel about that specific thing? And there's somebody like Eminem, he just doesn't care. And if he does, well, he says it anyway. He says everything, right?
But that was one of the more amazing things to me, actually, that when I was hearing you talk about your one and only, as far as I understood, hip hop influence in high school was Eminem, like, or,
Mhm.
90% of what you were doing. And just thinking about the way in which Eminem is going to, like, say his truth, live his truth, speak his truth. And something about that, it sounds like in your early music or when you were started doing it and you were just screaming to the void, howling or whatever it was, that was you, that was Eminem. And then I was reading about, again, this is all new for me, but your secondary influences later on in college when you started really freestyling and feeling like you're apparently in high school you believed you had friends who were good at this and you were not, and you didn't want
Yeah.
to look like an idiot, so you didn't. Did I misunderstand that? You didn't want to look
No,
like an
no.
idiot, so you wouldn't do it. So I
Yeah.
guess if you have fans listening now, what do you think of
Yeah.
your former self who felt like an idiot, so would not rap in high school? I mean, it's kind of interesting, right?
It is. I think everyone wants to be cool, especially
Yeah.
younger. We care about what the popular kids think about us, and the uh, the popular kids just so happen to be rappers,
Hmm.
and they were good. Like, it's like, damn, this guy's like 17. He's really good. And then on top of that, my friends in my group. So it's one thing if the popular kids are doing it, but when somebody in your group is doing it, it's like, oh, well, I can't copy him. Yeah, he's doing it. So they started doing it, and I just kind of took a back seat, and I was like, no, 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 I don't want to try. So that's why I feel like I broke out of that network, and it wasn't until I was a freshman in college where I was like, these people, I'm recreating who I am. Like some of those people aren't friends with me anymore, some are, but mostly no one knows me here. Who do I want to be? What do I want to do? And yeah, so I ended up being the white kid that was rapping in the middle of George Mason campus, 30,000 kids walking around with their backpacks between classes, terrible sound quality, rapping into a microphone with no audience, people just walking by, stopping, like, is he really doing that? I'm like, I have to see them and just keep rapping, don't think about
Do you
it.
have access to now to what you were feeling then? Like, what were you feeling when you were standing there and people were barely stopping or do you remember what it was like to be you then?
It was a combination of, there's definitely like an adrenaline rush for like a positive of like feeling kind of like a badass, like you don't have the guts to get up here, I did. And then the other half, probably more than half, I'd say three quarters, is just, God, what are they thinking? And trying to analyze their facial expressions, and are they moving? Are they bobbing? Are they just are they whispering to their friend? And it constantly pulls us out. That's why so many artists, to be fair, are drunk or not sober, and in some capacity while they're performing, because it allows us to just not see.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't have to see it.
Yeah.
And so yeah, connecting in, there's just a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear of judgment and actual judgment for myself constantly.
So it's interesting to me that like Eminem was, well, Eminem is Eminem, so probably he was just Eminem because he was Eminem. But Eminem was there, as the person you were listening to, I think, and just hearing you speak, maybe the music spoke to you, it spoke to all of us, but also a sense of him getting up and not really. I guess in my field, I sometimes talk to my clients about playing both sides of a tennis court. Like you're in your own head, and you're also going over to the other side and saying, "Hey, what does it look from here?" And it's a very
Mhm.
difficult way to play tennis, right?
Yeah, it is.
So I guess Eminem doesn't really do that, right? He's just like stakes it out. It's like, this is my side of the court, man. Like if you're enjoying it, like feel free to lob back. And I guess what I'm hearing is like your first influence was someone who stayed at his side of the court. And then I guess I was thinking about some of your influences that you've named in college, whether it's MGK or Logic or Dizzy Wright or Mortal Technique. Overall, the sense of things is these are people who really were looking not at what they were saying, but what is the impact of what they were saying, right?
Yeah.
Do you
For
agree with
sure.
that? Because I know nothing
Absolutely.
about music. I'm just,
Yeah. Well, I think it's a mix of both. I think they
yeah,
care about what they're saying and that they're bringing lyrical value.
yeah,
But I think one common factor in all of the artists that you listed is that they are speaking truth regardless of what anyone says. They
yeah,
are just so honest.
right,
With Immortal Technique, they're touching on depths of gang activity and like serious political corruption and like racism. Like and MGK is coming from a tough neighborhood in Cleveland and just he's just an underdog rising up and with just brute anger and just a crazy good rapper. But they're doing it whatever their dynamic is. They're just honest. They're just real,
yeah,
and they just and I don't think they don't care. I think these people struggle with depression. They care. They've just made a choice of you know what my expression is more important than what they could think and what they will think. And if someone's going to do this, if some of your listeners are listening to this and they're like, I love singing,
mhm.
I love painting, I love writing, but my friend Sally thinks I should be focused on my doctorate, and my friend Josh thinks I should be more practical. The quicker that we just snip those chords and focus on what genuinely makes us feel passion, if I could give myself any advice, it would be to do it sooner.
So what the amazing thing to me is that you spoke to me about that you're struggling with this now, right? You can't write a song just for you. Like
Came
you're
back.
Yeah, you're giving this advice out, and I hope it's like what did my folks say growing up? They said to me, "Oh, do as I say and not as I do, please." you
Right.
know, but there's some sense unless it's really hard, right? Like that your passion, your driving force, what gives you your life hope, meaning, all that is getting back to where you were when you were 18 and terrible, right?
Yeah. Let's
Um,
go back there.
and it's hard, right? Like here you are, and you're like, wait, hold on, but I am also on the other side of the tennis court. I need it to land right. And part of
Hmm.
that, I guess, what I'm thinking for you as an artist is very different than for others, because you mentioned that for some artists, like they're doing well. One song just did amazingly well and they want to land another really great one. And sure, that's there for you. And you talked about the business side. But the other thing you alluded to is you have a dual problem, as far as I can tell. You have, doing well business wise, but you also have, will it land well, will it help my fans? That's a very unusual burden. It should be consumer friendly, and should also, help people. That's not a burden most people have. So I guess
Yeah,
I'm just wondering how one would even write with both those things in mind and trying to get to deeper truths. It seems hard to me.
it is hard. The truth is, my fans would receive me for anything I said. In fact, I think they can feel energetically. Maybe it's subconscious, but they know when they're being bullshitted. Oh, that was a good track, but when someone's emotionally delivering the real truth, whether in tone or in words, it is instantly going to be received better. There may be more haters, for sure. Like it's more edgy. We can't avoid them. That's what I know. It's just going to happen. People are in pain, and when they're in pain, they're going to project and they're going to find ways to shoot everyone else down. So it's just going to happen. But that is the thing that I'm holding on to, and that I know I'm working back towards. Is the more that I give, the more that they will appreciate. No matter what it is. Honestly, I believe that. It could be the most dark, crazy, borderline, psycho written track, and they would be like, wow, he was honest. Dude, Lucid, that was amazing. Thank you so much. They would appreciate it. And
Listen,
I
what
think people
if
need to know that.
I'm just wondering, like with that in mind, what is your fear about going and writing something? If you were able to get all this out of your head, what is your fear of what would actually come out?
It's not about my fans. I've realized it's not about my fans. It's about the people I do know. Um, there's a certain level of pressure that comes from wanting to maintain a certain image for my dad, for example, or my mom, or my sister, or a close friend. Like, just, damn, I don't want them to see me that way. Damn, I don't want them to know that I'm struggling with that. And that is the most dangerous piece. is because that's why people isolate, and that's why I haven't written as much as I could. It's that genuine fear of like, I just don't want them to have the knowledge. I don't want them to know, and then that have that change their perspective towards me. Um, so I recognize that because I don't think it's my fans. I really think I don't have any fear releasing anything to my fans. I really believe them to be like the most supportive community ever, and they encourage it. So I've noticed it comes down to the people I know, and that's scary because then I think about my fans because they're not talking to the people that they know for the same reason. And if they don't have a therapist and the counselor at school doesn't really care about his job, mom and dad are too busy, and the best friend you just can't talk to because it wouldn't be cool, what do you do? So that's where I think 95% of people are stuck, and that's where I find myself. I've got beautiful friends and my partner and my therapist. I have outlets to talk. I'm not saying that for me. I've done the work, and I have a lot more work to do. But on a public scale for my music, that's my disconnect. It's like shit, you know, just some fear around delivering the full emotions because they're intense.
Hmm.
You know, we're all human and we have a lot of crazy thoughts. So.
I guess to me, I always wonder when people talk about, the fear of how it would land with people that are closest with them. I wonder, how much of it's about how much that would land with yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and whether people that you're closest to are a proxy for that. Like if you really spoke everything that was going on inside, the fear of what would that be?
Mm. It's a good question. I mean, I've spoken the depths of my truth fully in my lifetime to the right people. I just haven't crossed the bridge publicly because the song is public. I think that's the thing.
Well,
It's
again,
like,
we're talking about like you. I don't know. You're going to write one song for Christmas, but I'm saying, let's say you gave yourself space and time to, write the way you used to write at 18,
mm-hmm.
and you knew that you just probably wouldn't release any of it, right? I
Mm.
mean, the kinds of things that you'd say and think and feel wouldn't be mired in opinion of fans or of family or partner, right? I
Mm.
guess I'm just sort of wondering what the hesitation there would be to spend a week. COVID's given us all some time that we didn't expect. What would the hesitation be in like really leaning in hard there?
Mm. I don't like the answer, but my initial answer is if it feels like a waste of time. And I know it's not. It's just that I have 2 companies and I can make a million excuses, right? 3 companies. And I just have a lot going on mentally. And I think that's what's in the way. It's just making excuses. There's no reason why I shouldn't just write to myself. It's a beautiful process and it's so beneficial. And I encourage people to do it. So, yeah, it just comes down to setting out the time and doing it. And it's really easy in the moment right before you do it to go, I can do this later. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's putting our own mental health off. It's me putting my own mental health off. So it's not encouraged. But that's the truth in terms of just making excuses around sitting down to do it.
Well,
So,
I guess if we could like, jump, 3 weeks in the future and you've spent some time wasting your time not making money, not tending to your 3 businesses and all that, and
yeah.
you've really leaned in hard
Yeah.
and you've given yourself the gift of what you used to give yourself the gift of at 18 because you had no choice, right? Like
Yeah.
that's what you had to do. If can you imagine if you gave yourself that space and time, then we had another conversation, what you might be saying differently?
I think it will feel good. No matter what comes from it, no matter what I write,
Mm.
I think it's a wonderful challenge because I think it will feel good. It will feel good because I will do it. But it'll feel like relief. It'll feel like internal confidence building. Um, I think it'll feel just aligned and authentic. So, yeah, I mean that's my assumption.
Yeah. I guess one of the things about, I guess, I'm not sure exactly how to put this. I'll just be frank. What the heck not? It's a couple people listening. But the first season of Ask Freudina, which is the podcast associated with Freudina, we had listeners call in with problems they were having. And
Mm.
we, meaning I, but my team really puts it all together, sat down and just crafted responses one on one to each person. And at the
Mm.
end of each episode, said, okay, the following five callers may have sounded like they have nothing in common, but this is actually what's going on. It's all the same thing.
Mm.
And that season's really about, it's called Flip Your Script. It's really about enactments. And the reason I'm bringing it up is I think that the way I was trained to think is that we all have different parts of ourselves that are constantly sort of all there, but we can't really experience them at the same time. And
Mm.
sometimes when you're having a conversation with someone, the thing they're projecting back to you is some aspect of yourself. So, like as you're speaking, I'm assuming that I'm just kind of a version of Lucidious speaking to Lucidious,
Mm.
that there are aspects of you who want to sit, want to write this stuff, are wondering who the heck is this guy who's got three companies, all these things that he needs to manage, the weight of the world on his shoulders. Like, where's the real guy?
Yeah.
Um, and I'm assuming that that's part of yourself that you're still looking for. Otherwise, it wouldn't have come up in our conversation.
Very true.
Yeah, I
Very
mean,
true.
I'm guessing that that's what it is. And I also am thinking a lot about the way in which you talk about the Lucidians. And I don't know if there are people who are less than Lucidians, like almost Lucidians, or, people who are just
Yeah.
fans and followers.
Yeah.
But there's so many people who listen to your music at times when they most need it, even if it's not their first thing they go to. They go there when they're sad, or they go there when they can't find words. And I'm wondering about the impact there also for people who are terrified to dig into the aspects of themselves that gave them the most solace
Mm.
in busying themselves with, the weight of the world and obligations. It seems like you have a lot of empathy there when you started talking about it earlier on. You have a lot of empathy there because that's where you're at,
Mm.
and these things accrue.
They do.
Yeah. So I guess
And I feel most bad for, well, a previous version of myself, which was extremely against therapy, made fun of therapy. If you go to therapy, you're clearly screwed up. Like it's for the wackos. You know, and that was a complete lie that I formulated based on my friend groups early on, and all the toxic masculinity of a lot of kids, specifically men growing up. And yeah, that was my outdated perspective. And now I love therapy. I love understanding and peeling back the layers and understanding how to, realign and become a healthier version of ourselves. And I feel bad for the kids who don't have access to that. Whether it's they're just in a bad neighborhood, bad school, their parents just won't put them in therapy. I don't know. There's a million different environments, but like I love my fans so much, and I don't. I wish I could help more because they're just reaching out in so much pain. It's so
yeah,
incredibly heavy,
yeah,
you know. And I have issues, sure. I had a tough childhood in many ways, sure. But some of the things that these people share are like, you're like, how are you even managing that? And how am I complaining about mine?
yeah,
And I know it's not about comparison because a paper cut still hurts,
yeah,
but it's humbling to see some of the stories.
yeah,
And if I wish everyone had more access to
yeah,
safe conversation, because I think it comes down to safe conversation,
yeah.
whether it's with a therapist, a friend, or someone. It's just the ability to speak freely.
That's right. That's right. I guess I was thinking if it's okay with you, we started down a road earlier. So many of the things we've talked about have been important. So it's hard
Yeah,
not to
feel
get
free to
lost in
take
it.
the reins.
But I said to you in the beginning of our conversation, like one of the things that interested me was like, how does someone become a Lucidious, right? Like, how does someone become a moral person who's so deeply concerned about others? Because, I think a lot of people, including parents out there who are struggling with, lots are going on. What should be the kind of thing I aim for to get a certain kind of result, right? I want to raise a
Mm,
good kid. And something about your life story just struck me that you spoke quite honestly about a very complicated childhood, which I am a psychoanalyst, but there's no need to go through every little bit of it. But the parts of it that seem to matter is you talked a lot about being alone a lot in your room. That your family had spaces that you all mutually just agreed, we'll see you at dinner, and then everyone's going to go do their own thing, right? So you had a
mhm,
lot of space.
mhm,
But something else impacted me that you
mm,
talked about 9/11 and how that hit you. And I was
mm,
wondering if you might say something about that now in retrospect, given looking back at yourself at that point in time.
mm.
Why do you think that younger Lucidious was impacted in that way? And
Well, I mean, that's interesting. I was young.
yeah,
That was, I was 11. I was 11. So I think that was the first time that I had seen, especially like on a television, I'd ever seen something so violent and real, like outside of a movie. And, beyond my neighborhood, something that had impacted so many people, and to see so many lives taken. It happens all the time around the world, every day, unfortunately. But the United States and like the media are very good at blowing up the United States stories way more than international stories of equal importance. And so, as a kid growing up in the United States at 11 years old, well, 9/11 was everywhere. They took us out of school. Everyone was terrified. And I think I had a distorted lens on it as well, blaming certain cultures and people for not understanding that wherever they're from, for example, that in that case, the Middle East, and understanding that they too have generational trauma. They too are humans. They too have reasons for their actions and have extremists that aren't in alignment with the majority. And so again, that's way more present day awareness. But like back then, I didn't know. I was just angry. I was like, wow, that's terrible. There are bad people in the world. I need to do something about it. How can I help? And at that time, it was really that day that I just became fascinated with this whole idea of justice, like criminal justice. How do I work against counterterrorism? How do I play my part in my role here? And yeah, really for the next 9 years, yeah, ish, I dedicated my interests, my studies. I went to two different high schools my senior year, one for general studies, one for administration of justice, and then went into college for it. And it just formulated, it kind of like sparked my anger. It assisted my anger for sure, to want to make a difference. I was like, I just want to get the bad guys. And I think I developed a desire rather than going after specifically bad guys doing crimes, guys or girls. Um, I developed a fascination with why. Why are they doing that? Just like you did, clearly, because you studied psychology. And I did it in a different way. I went down the arts realm and the self-expression and emotional feeling realm. But I have such a fascination with things, and I'd love to. I'm sure we could have another conversation, and just I would dig
to-
into that mind for sure.
totally, but
But
only after said completion. Christmas
of the
this year
track,
means that you apparently feel all sorts of feelings. But yes, after that event,
of
yeah,
course,
that's I felt the same way. That you
yeah,
were coming at it from a similar place. That why the heck was
yeah,
this happening? Why would people want to do this?
yeah. And I when I worked at the NRA, and again, there's no judgment.
Yeah,
It's not a one size fits all, but a lot of people there were
yeah,
angry.
hmm
They were frustrated with their careers. They were tired from chasing and trying to fix these issues. I'm like, that sounds like a tough career. And I'm a very hard person at heart. From childhood, I've been kind of closed off, cold, had to work out of selfish tendencies. And I was like, this career is going to hurt me. I was like, I know somebody as prone to anger as me and struggling with things, going deeper into that, you know, toxicity is not going to help me. So I steered away from it. and it's not. I value those people. Like we need the people to go to those places and work on conflict resolution, and I respect them. I just couldn't do it for myself. So
But what's so interesting is that when you talk through your life experiences and the things you've tried and then decided no, and you talk about it as certain selfishness, I really heard your life story very differently. So I'd like to share my lens with you,
yeah,
if I
please.
if I could. When
Yeah.
I heard about sort of early childhood experiences, and you've been very open with many aspects of them, and of course, I think appropriate and not sharing others. Because I said there are really a lot of people in the world you care about, but there are only a certain number that you care about that much. And I love how you safeguard that and are still open. I think that's a real gift, to be able to find that line. It's a hard one. Um, but in any event, growing up in the way you did, and still being that kid who was impacted and said, "Gee, want to do something to help out," and then the way you sort of frame, going to the NRA, I think you did an internship there, right, and then
Hmm.
seeing Homeland Security and finishing your job, and then seeing the way people were hardened or angry or
Hmm.
had tough lives and say, "Oh, that's not for me." It's interesting because then I guess as far as I understood, you went when you went to find something else that was nothing like that, and you found yourself at some point for what 4 years selling supplemental health insurance to teachers, scaring them about
Yeah.
illness, cancer, all this stuff's going to happen. You better buck up, right? And
Hmm.
now here again you are in a what seems like a very different career, right? As a rapper, hip hop artist, right? And the same
Hmm.
struggle seemed to come up. Like you want to be a person who doesn't feel the weight of the world, and you're trying really hard just to do your job, to show up and warn people. Like illness happens, buy this stuff, scare technique. But you still have mentioned, I think that you knew the stats. It wasn't like you were lying. You were just telling the truths. And here again, you're at least your third career. My guess is you've tried on others. Most of us have.
Hmm.
Um, of saying, I can't handle this. I'm inherently a selfish guy, is I think the way you were framing it. Like, I'm out for me. That's just sort of who I am. But nothing about your life story actually sounds that way to me. Every time you've moved on, it struck me that you were saying there's some kind of permeable membrane where some stuff's supposed to come in and some stuff's supposed to stay there in order to function. And actually, I'm a person who feels an awful lot empathically. So I can't really hit a field where I'm constantly going to feel that much. Rather than what I think the way you frame it is, oh, I don't want to become an angry, hardened guy. I think it's unlikely that that's really what would have happened to you. It strikes me you're a person who feels a lot and is super empathic. And
Thank you.
yeah,
Thank you for that. I appreciate that perspective.
yeah.
I think just to clarify on the word selfish, I think at an early age, I learned that I needed to isolate and disconnect to feel okay. So connection scares me. Luckily, I have a partner who has taught me a lot about that, like being more safe and more vulnerable. And but still, it's rooted really deep. And I oftentimes, unconsciously, I choose something that's best for me. And sometimes don't think about others right away, and it's selfish. And I don't think there's anything wrong with being protecting ourselves and choosing our desires and what we want, but there is definitely a level of like inclusiveness and awareness that I would like to get better at in general as my life goes on, and just being more just like helpful to people around me. I do so much in my brand, and I've made a lot of positive career moving shifts, but just mentally, I think it's those thoughts that are just chemically aligned for so many years. There's just bad, just habits of, hey, disconnect, close out, don't talk about that, protect yourself, just very isolated, alienated thoughts that trigger actions that I don't actually believe in. When I step back, I meditate and I go, hmm, that's not how I feel. I don't need to do that. That's a place of lack. That's something is triggering me. And So I appreciate what you're saying, and I believe that. I do believe that as well. I know I have a great heart. I want the best for everything I'm involved in, and I'm also very open in saying I've got trauma. I'm in therapy as well. I know I can show up differently. I know I can be more selfless. I know there's a lot of growth left for me. Um, I think it would have been a tough career path for me. That's all. I think it would have been a very
Yeah, I mean, and you
tough career
think
path.
you chose one that was inherently more self-directed, but here we are, and you've become, the emissary for mental health. So I guess in some way, we can't really escape the essence of who we are. I guess you don't see yourself as inherently a helper or in a helping profession, but I think you solidly are, my friend. If
Mm,
just seems like you solidly are, and maybe
thank you.
maybe those moments of isolation and cutting yourself off that enable you to be so giving and so real with people at other times. Maybe that's your recharge space. I think we all have very different, recharge spaces. And, from my own self, in terms of why I do what I do, I was, treating people one on one, which I still do. I have a practice. And then I've been teaching other therapists. All over the country. I teach a few places, and I also
Mm,
teach overseas. So I teach in China, and I teach some things in India, and I've
wow,
done some stuff in Ethiopia, and I've traveled to Siberia. I mean, I've done a lot of those kinds of things, and cross
that's so
culturally,
cool.
which is great because then you get to help people learn how to do it, and then they get to go help people how to do it. So you're impacting more and more people. But my own thoughts and beliefs were again in March when I started becoming Freudina, was that it wasn't enough, meaning as many
Mm,
people as you could impact, how could you do it more? And the idea of behind Freudina was, well, if you just put mental health resources, you started putting them all together somewhere where people could just sort of get them.
mm,
And it didn't have to be fancy because if you can get online and go to Insta and look up something cool, like your, favorite, rap artist or something, you could also look up like, all right, I want to be in my own room. Like, what do people actually do when they
mm,
want to be better? How do I craft, like, instead of an artisanal cheese board, how do I self
mhm,
curate a bunch of resources that may actually help me? So the idea was to try to make it more available to people, the best of the best, and not just sort of the crummy people who can afford to do this. It's very, very hard. I think mental health in this country, decent mental health, is very expensive and very hard to come by. And it really doesn't have to be that way. I think that's what I've learned.
mm,
Some part of what I think the DIY aspect of it also struck me that I was doing this only since March, but you've been doing it now a good couple of years. That music itself, and
mm,
it was also being, shepherded through this screen of labels and managers and all this other stuff. And you also were a person who was like, okay, well, if we didn't do it that way, right? A, I could make more money, so I could probably choose to do the things I want to do, and B,
mm,
this sort of screen between me and my fans might dissipate in some way, right? So
absolutely.
I really, valued that. Another thing I truly love about of what you do with your free time is I think you mentioned that you listen to a lot of instrumental piano and
Mm,
the kinds of music. I think you mentioned once was a Hans Zimmer, right?
Hans Zimmer.
Yeah. So you're sitting with the ambient piano songs, and that's your space, and it's your creative space, which
It's like
is
80% of my day.
which
It's like
is
meditative
which is
soundscapes.
which is amazing. I'm wondering, Lucidious, do you have questions for me?
Mm,
Or any either about what I've heard or what you've said, or general questions about mental health or anything else regarding the
sure,
world for Dina? Thank you for being so open, and I'd really just
of
like to
course.
reciprocate in any way, and we'll cut out of this anything that doesn't feel comfortable afterwards. I think that makes sense.
It all felt good.
Okay.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Hmm.
Well, first of all, could you tell me what is it like? What's it like to talk? Like when I'm asking these questions, what's it like for you?
To respond to these type of questions,
Mm,
as as time has gone on, because I communicate so often with my fans on similar topics, it really comes naturally for me. Um, It started earlier in Florida, like 3 or 4 years ago. I took a very intensive therapy course that was like a 33-hour weekend, and I did it every 6 weeks for like 2 years, where they really, really break down. I mean, we've all been through some. There's different variations of these all over the place, but really tough and like awakening experience. That was really just the tip of the iceberg of realizing how much I had been avoiding, and still hearing voices from the things I was taught years ago because it was so impactful. Um, but since then, it hasn't been too awkward for me to meet someone new, and to, if I get a good, trustworthy, energetic vibe, to just be like, yeah, like, I do have issues with this, and I struggle with this, and I don't feel shame just being real about problems and about mental thoughts and fears, and whereas previously I would just lie through my teeth about how I was really feeling. So now I could stand in front of, whether you have 2 listeners right now or you have 10 million next year, like, I would speak the same, and it doesn't bother me. I think when you start to touch into some of the deeper rooted parts that I avoid, I can sense some just internal awkwardness of like, but then I'll still respond. But yeah, very few points of tension for me. Like, this is safe for me. Like, I feel better, if whether people are watching or not, after I talk about this stuff. It's like it brings awareness to myself. I'm like, oh, and it makes me feel relatable, not as alone. There's other people doing this type of work. My thoughts are sane. They're accepted. Like, I think I would feel worse not having the conversation.
By the way, totally, totally happy to take this entire thing, and put it the place that you ostensibly are putting your music, which is in your heart and your soul, and archive it. So, we'll do whatever we need to do with it. But any part of it, or even all of it, if it's just that's what happens with it, that's great. If this is what
Cool.
I mean,
I think I want to share parts of it with my fans too.
yeah,
I think a lot of these responses were great.
yeah,
Um,
that's okay.
I think I do have one question that
Yeah,
just came
sure, please, as many as you want.
So,
Mhm.
from a professional perspective,
Mhm.
educated, like,
Mhm.
from the psychology background,
Mhm.
w- do you have rules that you follow based on, like, when someone in that state of mind of, I'm going to kill myself? Are there any, like, immediate things that you have learned that are like just, they're rules almost to follow, that when that situation arises, what not to do? Because I need to make sure I'm not triggering or doing anything that I should not do. And then on the flip side, are there any things you should do in that moment of contemplation for someone?
Behind me, I don't know if you can see him. Can you see up there?
I can't.
I'm sorry. So I always keep Papa Freud around. And the reason I keep Freud around is not that my name is Freudina, but other than that, it just strikes me that one of the things Freud said that's true, and here we have proof, is whatever you're trying to avoid in life, that isn't going to happen. So here we are, and the one thing I wasn't going to talk to you about, I like swore up and down and all around, was about 2-3 days ago when I started going through your stuff and your music, and very seriously, your lyrics, really looking into them and really thinking about them. There was a SWAT team arrived at my house, and my street was blocked off. And the police came by to say that there was a shooter. This is a very unusual experience for me. There was a shooter who had sequestered himself in a building. It so happened the window is very close to my window of my office where we're sitting right now. And then I heard that apparently there was a gunman, and I should be very careful or something like that. And then there was a relief, like the SWAT team left and the news cameras all left, and they said, no, he just killed himself. You're good. And I had been sitting with, you can imagine which song I was singing with. It was Sitting With of Yours at exactly that time, was what you had written about Taylor. And I said, that's the response? 20-year-old kid just killed himself in the next door
You're
building.
good.
What the heck? And I was crying. I was really crying. I was like, I was just literally had been sitting with your music and with your thoughts and your feelings, and I'm thinking, this poor kid, his entire family, and the response here is like, oh, don't worry, gunman shot himself. Like, what the heckity heck? And of course, it had been the building next door as I was reading your lyrics and listening to your stuff, so
It's
I
a
think
lot.
it was a lot. So, as I said, I think Freud's always told us the stuff we avoid just comes back. And I told you earlier on, you were trying to avoid being the kind of giving, kind, empathic human being in the world. That it's a tough road to be. It's a tough road to be that kind of person, a giving person. But apparently, one way or another, you're doing it. So now you're doing it through music. Um, But I was thinking at that moment when you asked the question, I couldn't avoid but answer you honestly because you've been so honest, which
Mm.
is at that moment I felt, well, I could have gotten up out of my chair and gone down to the SWAT team and said exactly who's negotiating and I mean, I knew they had good people and all that stuff, but I hadn't really known, I hadn't understood. I thought there was we're supposed to stay in, but the door's locked. I had no idea it was someone who was considering self-harm. So those moments, I've come to the conclusion that you have, that there's sometimes an inevitability about them that we say about afterwards, but there's always this question of maybe not, right?
What would you have said if that did happen and you did open a? I think that's a little different. It's a very physical, in-person experience, right? Maybe than someone messaging you. I don't know. But what
I
would
don't
you
know,
have
but
done? What would you have said?
you've had it up close too. Things you just didn't know were happening. Like I didn't know what was going on. One building over, I can see the building now through the window right behind the screen.
Hmm.
I was literally listening to your song and looking at the lyrics, and had no idea. It was just another day at the office. But I guess that was the power of what you wrote. Like you and I are just sitting, we're having a day at the office, right? And now we're having this conversation, which we could be having over a cup of coffee or, a beer or something like 1 o'clock in the morning where we're both just having an honest conversation. And these things kind of have this way of impinging, of piercing real life out of nowhere. Like you're just doing your thing. You're opening up your phone. I don't know, maybe you're ordering a new Lucidious, hat for a fan or something, some kind of merch, and then this thing just shows up and you're like, oh my God, someone's about to hurt themselves. And I thought that the things that you said that you did, I don't know where you came up with them, seemed very smart. So I heard you say on a previous interview, and again here reiterate, anything you open, you respond to. And I think on a
Yes.
previous interview you said, I know people can see if I read it or not. And I know the impact of reading something. And then someone says, you read it and you didn't bother to respond. So at least I'm going to leave stuff unopened that I don't open. And then in the immediate sense, I think you do the thing we all do, which is, what would be the safest thing for this person? And my feeling is, whenever I get those kinds of things, I am the least adequate person on the planet to answer this question, right? Like any other person, a random guess is better than the thing I'm going to struggle with here. But, sort of going with your gut of what makes sense at that moment. I also thought it was kind of brilliant. Suicide hotlines are really one of the most important things we've done in the last while to be of help. But you said, gee, it's awfully difficult when a fan reaches out to me. There's a reason they're not calling a stranger on a hotline. So when, as far as I understand, and I don't know if it's still the way you practice, that you've set up groups of people who sort of support each other, who've all contacted you, and then they have that in common. Do you
Yeah.
mind saying something about that? Just the way that works?
Yeah, it's a little hard to manage. I've done 2 Facebook groups, both of which are not as active as they used to be. Facebook in general is not as active as it used to be. So then I was like, okay, well, Instagram's where it's at. So I set up upwards of 500 or 600 people in different pockets of chats, and it was really hard to manage. And I was like, okay. Overall, a lot of, I would say 90% positivity came from it. They struggled, they came in, there was that moment. they would say, "Hey, 2 a.m. and I'm from Australia right now, and to be honest, I feel like cutting myself." And somebody from Oregon in the United States would be like, "Yo, yo, 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 what's up? I'm here. You want to hop on FaceTime or, don't do that. I felt that yesterday." And I noticed that, for example, two girls always came together who both were cutters, and it wasn't under the lens of trauma bonding. What I noticed is in that environment, which was very much from me, it was a Lucidian environment. They felt a sense of not responsibility, maybe responsibility to show up for the other person, even though they were also struggling with cutting. Maybe on this day he wasn't and she was. So when she was, there was just like this, I'll pull you up. You got it. And maybe the next day, this person was like, "Oh, I'm falling down." They're like, "Oh, no, you were there from yesterday. I got this." And they noticed that it was a place for them to start feeling safe and getting familiar with reaching out and understanding that there are avenues that people can actually receive it with love and not judge them and, heaven forbid, tell them they're right or do something stupid. So then I took it from Instagram and I took it to Discord. Discord is like a chat application. Again, 500 or 600 people in there. Where probably right now there's somebody in the channel of positivity or in the channel of struggling. Like people are just opening up. I've segmented kind of the topics, and they can go into the channels and communicate. It's not for everybody, but if they're struggling and they really need an outlet, they have one. And I start to push people. I'm like, hey, when they reach out, I'm like, hey, first of all, I read this for a reason. I'm here. I don't get the chance to read a lot of my messages, but I totally understand where you're at, and I can't imagine how that feels. I just need you to know that I see you. I love you. I don't want you to hurt yourself. In fact, I'd love to welcome you deeper into my community. Why don't you join this group? Why don't you come into Discord? Why don't you just come introduce yourself? And they're like, okay. Most of the time when they join, they say, hey, like, I'm Josh. I'm new here, fan of music. And 6 people will go, hey, Josh, where are you from? And like, it's just like it's just instant acceptance. And I can't guarantee where the road's going to lead. But I started doing these group environments because I respond once, and maybe they go deeper the second time, and I go into a meeting, or I'm in the studio, or
Yeah.
it slips away. 10 more people send in, and then 6 months go by. I open it, and 6 months ago the last message they sent is, "I'm sorry, it's too much. Goodbye." And I'm like, shit, I missed it. And so, long story short, I'm just trying to create a system where they can still be in my network, be in my ecosystem, but connect with each other and still feel safe and get comfortable with what it feels like to reach out for help.
I have a lot of practical suggestions. I guess I'd
Yes,
prefer to
please.
give them to you offline if that's okay.
Okay. Yeah,
Um,
totally.
but I do, if you're actually asking the question, I feel that
I am.
that's a question that deserves a real answer. So yeah, let's do that when it's not super public. Maybe we can do it at the end of this. This is totally cool. I also felt like you had asked me a specific question about that I unconsciously dodged. There was something that you were struggling with that I missed.
Well, a lot of great stuff was shared. It was just more so,
Mhm.
and I know there's not necessarily a right answer to this, but from an education perspective, like how you were taught, is there a guaranteed no, or like pro versus con list, like guaranteed to do and to don't in that moment? Like if you were to get on the phone with that guy, is there like an instantaneously, is it what I can make assumptions, but
Sure.
if you have that,
Well, okay, I'm going to also make you another offer, which I don't know. You might actually take me up on it. I told you I'm teaching a 3-part suicide course to clinicians,
you did.
and it's to other people who are also managing it. It hadn't really, as much as I listened, you're a guy who, for all your, I don't know, I think of rappers as lots of bling and hip hop stuff. I don't know what that is really. You can tell. Yeah, you're one of those few people who do more than they say. That had not been my experience of the hip hop world, but you're doing a lot. I'm happy to give it to you. I will give you the course if you'd like.
Oh, I would love to.
It requires reading. Are you
That's
okay with?
okay. Yeah, I feel that I feel like calling. I need to be more educated on this.
Sure. I will give you the course. I'm giving this course at St. Louis Psychoanalytic, so you can take
Nice.
it with clinicians who are dealing with suicidality, or we
Okay.
can just get together. We probably won't have this whole fancy video thing, but
That's
we
okay.
can just read through the articles, and I can show you sort of best practices and the way I teach others to sort of think about, conceptualize, and then structure it. I'll just tell you briefly from what the stuff you've shared today and the stuff that I listened, because again, between now and when we get together, although maybe that'll be soon, there are lots of people who might be impacted on Discord right now. So I do feel a bit of a responsibility, as you do, to take it seriously. I loved when you said on your previous podcast, I have a policy. I respond once. I make it clear I'm not going to respond again.
Hmm.
And I think that you, from what I understood now, you've slipped a little bit
I
and
have.
that you may be responding again. So that's a thing that clinicians have all the time. And when I supervise people, I think that shows empathy, love, care, all the things we want in people who give a darn about others. If you didn't slip up sometimes, then you would not have the qualities we wanted in people caring for people. But
Hmm.
I do think it's a good plan for you to stick with the original I respond once, and then it's off your head, and it's you threw them, you sent them to Discord, you channeled them to something else. Otherwise, it becomes real slippery,
Hmm.
as you've noted. And I think most clinicians, when we have what we call the frame, we set up rules. Most people slip up sometimes, and then the goal is to get back to the frame. Because without a frame, and that's just what clinical talk is, but without guidelines, or I'm not sure what you'd call it in common
Hmm.
parlance, it's impossible to navigate the kinds of stuff you're navigating. So that rule struck me as very sensible.
Okay.
And then another thing you could probably do is figure out. I have no idea why I'm telling you all this, Lucidious. I feel a little bit silly, but you'll tell me to stop if it's too much. But on your original, on the Insta that I reached out on, um, I guess that would be the place that people would land on if they were just trying to find you once. Is that how most of your fans reach you? Like three DMs
Yeah,
there?
predominantly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess it would be good if you had sort of happy to help, really. If you had it set up in a way that people would know what the expectations are, what the rules are.
Hmm.
Knowing expectations and rules actually
You mean
provides
like of the
safety.
Discord?
Well, if I reach out to you and I kind of heard that my friend reached out to you once and he was going to kill himself and then he didn't because he spoke to you and it's all vague and I'm
Hmm.
having the worst day of my life ever, I'm not going to really be understanding the rules. But if we
Hmm.
could write them out explicitly in a way, and I guess that is a training you get in psych grad school about
Hmm.
how to sort of establish safety for you and for the other person. It provides a structure so people don't get too distressed and they kind of know what to
Yeah.
expect. Anyway,
Interesting.
I'm happy to talk you through any of this
Sure.
if it's
Yeah.
interesting.
No.
If it's
Feel free to
interesting to you.
just keep sharing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Whatever feels right.
no, it's totally fine. But it's possible that not everyone else in podcast land wants it. But yeah, but even afterwards, for sure. Like if you can go through some of the basic protocols with you if you'd like, because you've actually been holding so much I hadn't quite understood. It's amazing, and what you've done is I think. Probably with some conversations with some people, but also by some instinct, you've instinctively enacted a lot of the things that I think I was trained to do and didn't know. They may come more instinctually to you. So I guess you're a special person
Hmm.
in that way.
Okay.
Um, so let me give you a chance to read some of your to
Yeah.
read or
Sure.
and if you're some of your own stuff, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So we were just looking
Cool.
on a verse called, or it was the track's called "I Lost It." And one of my friends is actually struggling with suicidal thoughts. So he asked me to put together a couple bars that were relevant to the verse that he was writing. So I'll just read the lyrics for you. All right. So it says, "Life keeps moving, passing me by. Distant from the heavens, here I'm asking me why. Acting like we gonna live forever and forget that we die. Then we suddenly lose someone that we love and we cry. So why? Improvise, make mistakes, and I pray. Regret filling up my body, can you take it away? Internal voice talking to me, I've been troubled for days, but maybe longer, I don't know, because I've been stuck in a daze. Like a drug, always searching for a mental escape. For a while, I've been seeking out a comfortable place. I tend to slip, handcuffed in a difficult state, pushed to be great, then compare all the shit that I make. There's one side of me I love and one side that I hate. I'm back and forth with emotion, it's a game that I play. Dark secrets in a box, I just tuck them away. Step on a stage and create a lucid mind for display. So
Oh wow,
That's I guess a full verse, almost a little less than a full verse.
Oh, that's
I
very
lost
real.
it.
That's very real. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, because it was because it was for someone.
yeah, but I related to it.
Yeah,
I mean, I wrote it for me,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
like I mean, like a drug always searching for a mental escape could be simply the drug of validation, craving likes on your
Hmm.
Instagram post.
I
It could
love
be a
the
literal heroin. It could be anything.
I love the flip there. The drug that's escape for looking for a mental escape, right?
Because that's all it ever is.
Yeah. You still there? That like the likes and all that stuff, paying as much attention to it as you've written about?
As much, no. I don't read through all the comments and the engagement.
Mm,
I'll take sometimes I'll fall into it and I'll read. I also like reading the positives and responding to people, but yeah, no.
mm,
Like we released a track like 5 days ago. I don't even know how many streams it has because I refuse to like imprison myself to it.
mm-hmm. Are there any things that you're doing that are sort of out of music and out of all this and incredibly silly and wastes of time?
Playing with my dogs. I
Oh,
play a lot of video games.
oh. What kind of dogs and
Um,
what kind of video games?
Call of Duty, for sure.
Uh-huh,
Call of Duty is my game.
uh-huh.
And both of my pups, uh, my partner and I have two Alaskan Klee Kai. They're like miniature huskies, basically. They're like one's 13 pounds, one's like 18 pounds, and extremely talkative and dramatic. I mean, we've been training them to do a lot of cool stuff. We have like a movie bowl. My roommates and I put in 5 movies each. We pull it out. We watch whatever comes up. We just like love movies. Big into TV shows. Um, Huge into meditation. That's why I listen to so many soundscapes.
Yeah.
So um,
What are you hoping for in 2021 as things open back? Are you going to try to hit the road or?
definitely want to go back on my second tour. Um, Release my fourth album along with like another 6 singles into the fourth album. Of course, another at least 5 or 6 music videos. I would love my company that I'm launching, which is called Invoko, nvoko.com. Right now, it's just a wait list, but have that fully launched and have thousands of artists on it, benefiting from our service. And
Tell me a bit about it, what it is.
Invoko is essentially a collaboration platform between artists, but very specifically for legalities. Like, so we are putting the power back in artists' hands and trying to educate them on the importance of having a enforceable legal agreement between themselves and other featuring artists or themselves and producers, and actually helping customize dynamic contract language around the project details and having them actually be safe by the time the project is done. Even if they never spoke to the other party again, they're safe. Their generations are safe.
I'm hearing you. I'm hearing you, dude. Like, again, something else that you struggled with that was a mess that you're bringing
Exactly.
online for
Yeah.
everyone else not to have the same problems.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So, yeah, you're a busy guy.
Yeah.
Um,
We're very passionate about it. It's one of my biggest projects. I
that
love it.
that that's great. So, that's just wonderful. So I guess before we log off, I'll give you just another question. Are there any thoughts or comments or reflections you've had about the time we've spent together?
The main question that was coming up was just how I could be better serving my audience, which we kind of touched on, which is amazing. Thank you for offering just any expertise of your
Absolutely.
course
We'll
and like
make a
what you're doing.
time. I'll make a time. We'll do it. Absolutely. I'll just sit you through what we do in a hospital. I'll just walk you through it. Totally.
Sweet. Yeah, I would love that.
We don't have 500-600 people like in a hospital, man. So
Of course.
yeah. So I'm saying it's incredible what you're doing, right? You're doing this global thing, but same procedure should apply. So absolutely cool.
It should. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's just relatable. I thought it was really, I've turned down a couple other podcasts and interviews that my publicist told me about this one, and I love what you're doing. I know just based on reading what you're doing, you're a huge advocate and just for positive mental health awareness and just healing people. And we need more people. We need more energy around it, and to see someone doing it from a really strong, well-educated background is really refreshing. And to do so much homework on me and to actually care about my lyrics, my story, and what I'm doing, like it's beyond. I'm beyond grateful that someone would reach out with such, because sometimes people reach out and they don't really know. They ask questions on the spot, but they didn't really do any homework, and you clearly care about what you're doing. And I think it's really cool.
Thank you.
So I'm happy. I'm happy to be involved.
Thank you.
It's super cool for me.
I really, I can't thank you enough. It's nice to know that there are people out there that you haven't met, but that share the same sentiments. You know, life becomes a lot less lonely in general, right? More connections you make. Thanks for sharing. I'm gonna, I guess, formally we'll figure out a way that I'll end this, and then
Sure.
I'll just sort of stop the recording, so then we could just get down to other stuff that doesn't need to be on this. I don't even know the
Hmm.
way I'm supposed to end this because it's been a rather emotional podcast. Do you want to sign us off? Thank me, and I'll thank you, and then I'll just pause, and then I'll stop the
Sure.
record. Cool. Thank you.
Sure. Well, I would love to say thank you for having me. I think and I hope that this can be a powerful subject and topic for a lot of people, both for my listeners, your listeners. And if anything, I think what I would like to have it bring some clarity and resolution around is just that all of us are dealing with this, and the safest thing to do is to just reach out to someone that we trust and just talk about it. And it doesn't have to be so intense. It doesn't have to be so formal. There's not like take practices and courses and this and that. Just talk about it. And I promise, on the other side, I've experienced it for myself. I promise it always leads to somewhere better. You just have to reach out.
Thank you, Lucidiouss, so much for sharing of yourself and sharing of your music and being such a freaking good sport through all the silliness as well. And I know that our listeners are logging on, both yours and ours, probably for a lot of the more serious stuff, but hopefully some of the more silliness, some of the more silly way in which we allow ourselves to be also allows us to see that in really times that are very difficult or stressful things, allowing yourself to be faintly ridiculous is not a bad way to do it. I wanted to send a shout out both to your friend. You shared some lyrics to let him know that lots of people, including me, are thinking about him. And to have a
Mm.
friend that writes lyrics like that and feels your pain is important in the world. And we're all feeling that. And a shout out to my friend Zach, who got a call the other day by a very frightened and suicidal teen. And his response was to buy something equivalent to a password for a streaming service on TV. Said,
Mm.
if you could watch this celeb tonight, can you put it off? Can you put off suicide for 12 hours? And for about $5.99 saved a life. So sometimes it's
Mm.
the little stuff. So a shout out to all the people who are out there working on the forefront of suicidality and mental health issues that really never get acknowledged. You guys are underpaid and service at our most vulnerable. So thank you all for joining us. And Lucidious, you're awesome. Thank you so
Mm.
much.
Thank you.
And thank you listeners.
Thank you, guys.